When I couldn't reach my wife Jennifer on her phone, I got worried. She'd said she was on a classified operation. That night, I found the online poker site open on her computer. She'd been playing for 72 hours straight. My wife of 6 years, who claimed to be a CIA agent, was actually a gambling addict. My name is Michael Stevens. I'm 41 years old, and I just discovered that the woman I'd been married to for 6 years had built an elaborate fantasy life around being an international intelligence operative to hide the fact that she was systematically destroying our finances through online gambling addiction. But what I learned about the scope of Jennifer's deception would prove that her CIA career was just the tip of an iceberg that included identity fraud, financial theft, and a web of lies so complex that I'd been living with a complete stranger, sitting at Jennifer's computer in our home office at 2:30 a.m., staring at the PokerStars interface that showed she'd been logged in for 73 consecutive hours. I felt like I was looking at evidence from an alternate reality. According to this screen, Jennifer had lost $8,400 in the past 3 days alone. But according to Jennifer, she'd been in Eastern Europe for the past week conducting surveillance operations for the Central Intelligence Agency. The phone number I'd been calling to reach her during her mission was apparently just going to voicemail because she was sitting in our house gambling online while I thought she was serving our country in dangerous overseas operations. I scrolled through her recent transaction history and saw a pattern that went back months. Deposits, losses, more deposits, bigger losses. The amounts were staggering. In the past 6 weeks alone, she'd lost over $45,000. Where was this money coming from? Our joint checking account certainly didn't have $45,000 in it. Our credit cards were supposed to be paid off. Our savings account had maybe $12,000. The financial records I found that night revealed that Jennifer had been systematically liquidating every asset we owned, taking cash advances on credit cards I didn't know we had, and even borrowing against my 401k without my knowledge. But more disturbing than the financial theft was the realization that for 6 years, Jennifer had been living a completely fabricated life while I believed I was married to a CIA operative who was serving our country. To understand how I'd been so completely deceived, I need to explain how Jennifer's intelligence career had begun and why I'd never questioned her story. Met Jennifer Walsh 7 years ago at a coffee shop near Georgetown University, where I was working as a research analyst for a defense contractor. She was 29, intelligent, well-dressed, and had an air of confidence that I found immediately attractive. "What kind of research do you do?" she'd asked when I mentioned my work. "Policy analysis mostly, budget assessments for various government programs." "That sounds interesting. I work for the government too, though I can't really talk about what I do." The mysterious nature of her work had been intriguing rather than concerning. Washington, D.C. is full of people who work for agencies that require security clearances and discretion about their daily activities. Something in the intelligence community? I'd guessed. Something like that, she'd replied with a smile that suggested she couldn't say more, but was flattered that I'd figured it out. Over our first few months of dating, Jennifer had gradually revealed more about her career, always with appropriate caveats about security and the need for discretion. "I work for an agency that does international assessments," she'd explained during one of our early conversations. "I travel quite a bit, sometimes on short notice, and I can't always communicate when I'm away. That must be challenging for relationships." It is. Most people don't understand the demands of this kind of work. But it's important work, and I'm good at it. Jennifer's job had seemed to require frequent travel, usually for 1 to 2 weeks at a time. She'd get calls at odd hours, pack quickly, and disappear for days with minimal communication. "I'm sorry, I can't call more often," she'd say when she returned from these trips. Communication security is really strict when we are in the field. The lack of contact during our travels had been frustrating, but I'd understood that government work, especially anything related to national security, came with restrictions that civilian jobs didn't have. Jennifer's apartment had reflected her supposed career. She had maps of various countries on her walls, books about international relations and foreign policy, and what appeared to be sophisticated communication equipment. "I can't explain what half this stuff does," she'd said when I'd asked about some of the electronics in her home office. "But it's all necessary for the work." When we'd gotten married after 2 years of dating, Jennifer had explained that her security clearance required certain restrictions on what I could know about her work and where she traveled. "It's not that they don't trust you," she'd said. "It's that the fewer people who know operational details, the safer everyone is." I'd signed documents that I thought were standard security agreements for spouses of people with high-level clearances. Looking back, I realized these were probably fake forms that Jennifer had created to make her story more convincing. Our married life had been built around Jennifer's unpredictable schedule and the demands of her supposed intelligence work. She'd disappear for days or weeks with minimal notice, communicate sporadically while she was away, and return with vague descriptions of successful operations or challenging assignments. "How was Prague?" I'd ask when she returned from what she described as a surveillance operation. "Productive. I can't really go into details, but we achieved our objectives." "Are you safe doing this kind of work?" "As safe as anyone can be in this business. But yes, I'm careful, and I have excellent backup." Jennifer had seemed to genuinely care about her work and to take pride in serving her country in ways that most people couldn't understand or appreciate. Not everyone is willing to make the sacrifices that this job requires, she'd said during one of our conversations about her career. "But someone has to do this work, and I'm good at it." The financial impact of Jennifer's supposed a career had been significant, but seemed reasonable given the nature of her work. She traveled frequently, often to expensive locations, and needed specialized equipment and clothing for various assignments. "The agency reimburses most expenses," she'd explained, "but sometimes I have to cover costs up front and wait for reimbursement." She'd also explained that her salary was deposited into accounts that I couldn't access due to security protocols. "Everything related to my work has to go through secure banking systems," she'd said. "It's a pain, but it's necessary for operational security." I'd been responsible for most of our household expenses, while Jennifer's income supposedly went toward travel costs and operational expenses that would eventually be reimbursed by the government. The arrangement had seemed reasonable, and I'd been proud to support Jennifer's service to our country, even when it meant financial sacrifice on my part. But the discovery of her gambling addiction and the realization that her CIA career was completely fabricated meant that for 6 years, I'd been financially supporting a fantasy, while Jennifer used our money to feed a gambling habit that had apparently spiraled completely out of control. Investigation I began that night revealed the scope of Jennifer's deception and the extent of the financial damage she'd caused. Working with a forensic accountant named David Rodriguez, I discovered that Jennifer had systematically stolen approximately $340,000 over the past 4 years through various schemes that I'd never suspected. "She's been very sophisticated about hiding the financial trail," Rodriguez explained during our first consultation. "She created fake business accounts, forged documents that appeared to be government reimbursements, and even set up automatic transfers that looked like legitimate income." "How much are we talking about?" "Based on what I've found so far, she's taken about $85,000 from your joint accounts, $140,000 in unauthorized credit card advances, $75,000 from your retirement accounts, and approximately $40,000 from various other sources, including personal loans taken out in your name." "Where did all this money go?" online gambling sites, primarily poker and casino games. She's been playing on multiple platforms simultaneously, sometimes for 12 to 16 hours per day. Rodriguez showed me transaction records that painted a picture of an addiction that had been consuming Jennifer's life for years, while I believed she was serving our country overseas. On the day she told you she was traveling for work, she was actually here, in your house, gambling online continuously, he explained. She'd set up elaborate phone systems to make it appear she was calling from international locations. What about the travel? Her luggage? Her stories about different countries? She was probably traveling, but not internationally. Most likely she was going to casino resorts within driving distance, using these trips to gamble in person while maintaining the fiction that she was on CIA operations. The evidence Rodriguez uncovered showed that Jennifer's supposed intelligence career had been a complete fabrication designed to provide cover for a gambling addiction that had destroyed our financial security. But the scope of her deception went beyond just the financial theft. Jennifer had created an elaborate props and documentation system to support her CIA persona. The classified equipment in her home office was mostly purchased from electronic stores and online retailers. The secure communication devices were modified consumer electronics that served no actual purpose. The government documents I'd seen were sophisticated forgeries. The security clearance paperwork was fake. Even the ID badges and credentials she occasionally let me glimpse were purchased from novelty companies that sell movie props. She's essentially been playing an elaborate role-playing game for 6 years, Rodriguez explained. But instead of doing it for fun, she was doing it to hide a gambling addiction that was destroying your marriage and your finances. The confrontation I'd been dreading happened when Jennifer returned from what she'd claimed was a 3-week operation in Southeast Asia. How was the mission? I asked as she unpacked her luggage. Challenging, but successful. I can't really discuss the details. Jennifer, we need to talk. Is everything okay? You seem tense. I know about the gambling. The change in Jennifer's expression was immediate and complete. The confident intelligence operative disappeared, replaced by someone who looked cornered and desperate. I don't know what you mean. I found the poker sites. I've seen the financial records. I know you haven't been traveling for the CIA. Jennifer sat down heavily on our bed and was quiet for a long time before responding. How long have you known? About a week. Jennifer, are you actually employed by the CIA? No. Have you ever worked for the government? No. What do you actually do for work? I don't work. I haven't had a real job in 4 years. The conversation that followed was the most devastating of my life. Jennifer explained that her gambling addiction had started as a casual hobby, but had gradually consumed her life to the point where she was spending 12 to 14 hours per day online. It started as a way to make extra money, she said. I thought I was good at poker, and I won some money early on. But then I started losing, and I kept thinking I could win it back. When did you lose your real job? About 4 years ago. I was working for a consulting firm, but I started missing work because I was staying up all night gambling. They fired me. So the CIA story. I needed to explain why I wasn't working regular hours, why I was gone so much, why money was tight. The intelligence career story let me control when I was available and gave me an excuse for financial problems. Jennifer, do you understand that you've stolen over $300,000 from us? I always thought I would win it back. Every time I lost money, I thought the next session would be the one where I turned everything around. You've destroyed our financial security. We might lose the house. I know. I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. The addiction counselor that Jennifer agreed to see explained that her elaborate CIA fantasy was actually a common element of gambling addiction. Addicted gamblers often create elaborate fictional narratives to explain their behavior and justify their continued gambling. Dr. Patricia Williams explained during one of our joint sessions. The intelligence operative story was particularly sophisticated, but it served the same purpose as simpler lies about business trips or family emergencies. Was any of her concern about national security real? The concern was real in the sense that she'd convinced herself that her story was true. Many gambling addicts begin to believe their own fictional narratives as a way of avoiding the psychological pain of accepting their addiction. Dr. Williams explained that Jennifer's gambling had progressed to a level where she was experiencing withdrawal symptoms when she wasn't playing, and was gambling not for excitement or profit, but to avoid the anxiety and depression that came when she stopped. At this point, she wasn't gambling to win money. She was gambling to avoid the psychological consequences of not gambling. The legal and financial consequences of Jennifer's deception were severe and long-lasting. Because she'd forged my signature on several loan documents and had accessed my retirement accounts without authorization, she'd committed multiple felonies. "You have grounds for criminal charges," explained attorney Sarah Chun during our consultation, about divorce and financial recovery options. Identity theft, forgery, fraud. Jennifer has broken numerous laws. What are my options for recovering the stolen money? Limited. Most of the money has been lost to gambling sites, and those losses aren't recoverable. You might be able to get some compensation through insurance claims for the identity theft, but probably not more than $50,000. What about the house? You'll probably have to sell it to pay off the debts she created. The good news is that because these were fraudulent debts, you have legal protections that should prevent you from being personally liable for most of them. The divorce proceedings were complicated by the fact that Jennifer's gambling addiction was considered a disease, which affected how courts handled the financial crimes she'd committed. The court recognizes that addiction influenced her behavior. Attorney Chung explained, but that doesn't excuse the financial crimes or eliminate your right to divorce based on fraud and betrayal. Jennifer was ultimately sentenced to 3 years of probation, mandatory addiction counseling, and ordered to pay restitution of $200,000. Though everyone acknowledged that she'd never be able to actually pay this amount, the house was sold to pay off fraudulent debts. Our credit cards were canceled. My retirement accounts were nearly empty. But I was legally protected from most of the financial liability because I could prove that Jennifer had forged documents and stolen money without my knowledge. 2 years after discovering Jennifer's gambling addiction, I've rebuilt my financial life and have started dating again. The experience taught me to pay much closer attention to financial details and to be more skeptical of explanations that seem too convenient or that prevent me from verifying important information. The CIA story was brilliant because it explained everything Dr. Williams had observed during one of our final sessions. Why Jennifer was secretive, why she traveled frequently, why she couldn't discuss her work, why money was sometimes tight. It was a comprehensive explanation that discouraged questions. Jennifer is currently living with her parents and attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings while working a part-time retail job to begin paying restitution. She sends me updates occasionally, mostly to apologize and to let me know about her progress. In recovery, I know I destroyed our marriage and our financial security, she wrote in her most recent email. But I want you to know that I'm getting help and I'm committed to never gambling again. I appreciate her commitment to recovery, but I also understand that the Jennifer I thought I'd married, the intelligent, dedicated CIA operative who served our country in dangerous overseas operations, never actually existed. The woman I'd lived with for 6 years had been an actress playing a role to hide an addiction that had consumed her life and destroyed our relationship. The most painful part wasn't the financial theft or even the elaborate lies. It was realizing that I'd never actually known the person I'd been married to. Sometimes, the most sophisticated deceptions are the ones that give people exactly what they want to believe about the person they love. And sometimes, the most important protection you can have is the willingness to verify even the most impressive and attractive stories about who someone claims to be. Jennifer had built an entire identity around being someone exciting and important. But underneath that identity was someone who was afraid to face her own problems and who was willing to destroy our life together rather than ask for help with her addiction. The international spy who had supposedly dedicated her life to protecting national security had actually been gambling away our security every day while I was at work, believing I was married to someone who was making the world safer.